Okay, so I'm just going to give everybody a few minutes just to kind of roll in for the live session. For anyone that does pop in, feel free to let me know who's here. You can type your name in the chat. On the side of the screen, you should see a little chat box. You can kind of use that to type and communicate. But basically, what we're going to be doing today is just kind of going over some different things with the first week's activities. I'm going to kind of go over some different things for the viewport. We're going to talk about activity 1.3. I know probably some of you guys have already started looking at that content. So we'll kind of show you what we're going to do for 1.3. I'm really excited to show you guys a bunch of different things here for the first week. But yeah, welcome to your first live session. I'm sure you guys are all pretty excited too because it's finally the first time you're going to be using a 3D software. And that's really why you're all here, right? And so I'm kind of curious, for anyone that's kind of hanging out with us right now, uh, does anyone have a prior experience with Maya, like before you enrolled here? Because I know a few people that show up have done it in high school. They were kind of practicing on the side. It might have been a different software. Could have been like 3ds Max, but just kind of curious. Oh, one thing too, as a heads up, there's a little bit of a delay between uh, like what you guys are seeing and what I'm saying live. It's about like a 10-second or so delay typically. So sometimes if you guys are typing to me, it may be like a slight delay before you guys get a response back. But we'll try to answer stuff as we kind of go through this thing. All right, so we got a few people in here. Hey Taylor, what's up, Eric? Good to see you guys. So let's just kind of maximize this thing. Cool. Hey Luke, what's up? Hey, yeah, so we got a intro to modeling class or previous caller. So a couple of you guys, yeah, it sounds like you've already been using 3D software a little bit. So Maya is kind of interesting because it's actually is more intimidating kind of at the beginning just because it's a really intense looking program. It's just so many menus throughout the software. But uh, this whole first month and really the first couple of months, we're just going to be getting you guys comfortable with the software, getting you warmed up to everything, so it doesn't feel as intimidating. So that way, when you start moving forward into other classes, uh, you kind of know what to do. So the main goal, just so we're all aware here, is for the first week. We're going to be talking about just the interface. We're going to be getting into cameras, creating our own cameras, and I've redesigned stuff in this class. This month is a little different than the previous month. I'm always trying to change things and just make it a little bit more streamlined for everybody. So uh, what we've kind of done now is we're putting live sessions as their own separate activity, just so it's a little bit easier and more accessible for everybody. So I'm kind of really excited to see how that works out this month. But the main idea here, this might be the first class you've had, which is set up like this, is make sure I'm at full screen. Yep, I am. Every week when you're going through this class, when you see the 3 activities, the second one, the live session, has no weighting, but it ties into what you're going to do for 1.3. So you'll notice, for example, 1.2 and 1.3 have the same start date and the same end date. So they both run Wednesday to Sunday. You don't have to submit anything for 1.2, but what I do want you guys to do, because I'm sure a lot of you, some of you may have actually got to this live section by clicking on this little button right here and ended up here. But if you've participated in the live session, or if you're watching this later and you're seeing the recording of this, once you've kind of gone through this and watched the content, just do me a favor and make sure you're hitting the mark as completed button. It's just a way for me to sort of keep track of who's watching the video for the live session, whether it was live or after. It doesn't really matter to me either way, but it really helps me kind of understand sort of the way things are structured in the class, so I know what live sessions or what time slots for live sessions seems to work better for people. So that way, moving forward into future classes, if it turns out certain times or days work better, I can kind of refer to this stuff and kind of get a better idea as to like how the turnout looked for each activity. Hopefully that makes sense. But once you're done viewing the live session, you're going to use this information here today. to assist you with doing this guy. And we are going to spend a little bit of time here today going over 1.3 just to give you a good overview of basically what we're doing for that one. So we have one big submission on Sunday. Not going to be too difficult, I think, for most of you guys. It's really just getting you warmed up to the software and getting you comfortable moving around in the viewport. And then eventually you're going to be turning in a couple Maya files. All right, so let's jump in here and kind of check a few things out. So what I'm going to do for the live session is I'm actually going to hop into 1.3, and we're going to come down here a little bit. And there's like this welcome videos and all this fun stuff you get to read. But a little farther down, we have a downloads. So we're going to want to download that. And below that, you can see we have playlists. I'm sure you guys are probably used to seeing video playlists before, but when you are watching the videos, make sure that in the top right corner, you can see this little click here. You want to hit this button and make sure you do watch through the playlist. Now, the one issue I kind of have with these playlists that are embedded is because the LMS tends to, it doesn't scale very well for our monitors because we have like a 4K resolution monitor. One of the issues with this is that this stuff looks really, really tiny. So if you have issues seeing anything inside of Maya, which I would completely understand considering how small this is, what I would recommend you do is when you start playing a video, you can just pause it immediately. Down here in the corner where it has a little YouTube button, just hit this and this will pop out a separate tab, and this is going to take you to the YouTube link for all the videos. But the cool thing about this one is when you pop it out of the LMS, you can still go to like theater mode, full screen. You can kind of, sit back, eat some popcorn, and just watch it with this setup right here. So definitely a lot easier to see everything once you have this thing maximized into a much, much larger resolution. All right, let's just close that down. And down here for the documentation, again, this is also embedded. So there's slides. You can click through these. I'm sure you guys are probably pretty used to this, though, because you had to do it in the previous activity anyway. But again, you can go to full screen, maximize it, so it's a little bit easier for you to see everything. So there we go. And some rubrics. And eventually you're submitting stuff down here. All right. So I've already downloaded this stuff. Hey, Chantel and Jalen, welcome to the party. So I've got these guys downloaded, and I've already got them organized in a folder. One thing I would really encourage you guys to do, and I know a couple of you have already done this because I've met with a few of you one-on-one, but what I want you to do, if you haven't already done this, is at some point this week, I want you to just take a moment to think about the organization of your classes on your laptop. So what I've done is in my documents folder, so I'm in Explorer. I've got the Explorer window open. I'm in documents, and you can see I have a folder here called LAFS, so my LA Film School folder. I have a bunch of other ones too that are kind of related to other things, but inside of the LAFS folder, what I've done for me is I have different folders set up per class. So we have like Can 110 is digital painting one. You guys haven't hit that one yet, but that's going to be next month. I have a few things in there I kind of work on. Can 115, which is this one, Can 120, that's going to be shading and lighting 2. So I have a folder for the class. You guys could totally name it like the class name, like shading and lighting 1, shading and lighting 2. You can use the course code, that's totally fine. But inside of that, what I want you to do is start making folders according to the activity. So you probably don't need the 0.2s necessarily because they're live sessions, but if you wanted to, you could still do that. So I have like 1.2 to 1.3, and it's kind of like that for each week all the way to the end. And then I do have some other folders outside of that maybe don't quite fit into one of these, like random projects I'm downloading. I might have I have assorted graphics I use in some of my activities. They're all kind of down here. But like for 1.3, for example, when you guys download those Maya files, if you have a folder set up already, you can just drop those files in here. You can right click, you can do extract all just to unzip it because it isn't a zip file. And then it's going to pop it out into a little folder. It's actually the one we're using today. And you're going to see something that looks like this. There's going to be 2 Maya files and a couple little reference images. So we're trying to match these. And then on the environment project, you don't have to match any reference. We're just going to create a camera, and we're going to allow you guys to make your own composition. So, but the big thing right now is I just want you guys to think of it a way you want to organize your classes and your projects and try to follow through with that through every class, because it's kind of nice because you're still so early in the program. This is like the perfect moment for you guys to kind of just take that moment to get everything structured properly, because this will pay off for you guys so much later on. Um, I know it seems like such a simple thing, and probably a few of you guys have OCD issues like I do, where you need things to be organized a certain way or it bothers you. Um, but this is going to really be a really good practice for you. And even if you're not an organized person, just try to practice it. It does take time to get used to doing this stuff, but it's going to again really pay off in huge dividends for you by the time you're near the end of the program. All right. If you have any questions about organization, just let me know. But what we're going to do is I've already got Maya open. We're going to open up a couple things and just talk about the interface and show you a few things we can do in the viewport for the next activity. So uh, one of the things we're going to be doing with 1.3 is trying to get you to construct cameras that look just like this. So we're going to talk about the viewport's navigation. Now, anytime we want to open a Maya file to start something like this, like let's say we want to do the character project. Now, I do have a Maya file, right? And I'm sure a lot of you are used to opening things by simply double clicking. Now, if I double click on this, it will open the file. The thing that you want to be careful about with this, doing it this way, is when you double click in a Maya file, I'm not going to do it, it will actually open up a new version of Maya. Now, if I didn't have Maya open, it would just launch the software. But in week 2, you're going to see us start talking about something called Maya projects. And there's a very particular way you're supposed to open things in Maya. And I don't want you guys to start building a bad habit of opening things by simply double clicking on a Maya file. So instead, what I want you to do is anytime you want to work in Maya, open the software first. So I'm sure a lot of you already have it, on your taskbar down here, right? So I have it down here. I've already clicked it. It's opened. It does take a bit for it to open up occasionally because there's a lot of plugins that go with it, but it's opened up. And if I want to open a Maya file, we actually want to use file open to open it up. So we're going to open it after Maya has already been opened. So there's a couple ways to open it. You can do open. You'll notice there's a hotkey right here, Control O. So it's going to be open scene. We can also have a little open button right there. We have an icon, same thing. So kind of pick your poison on that. Doesn't really matter. So we're going to go to open, and you can see right now this is going to it's kind of showing me a different directory. This just happens to be the last location I was working on something. I was doing a project earlier in the day. So we're going to back up, and if I wanted to, I could go to my documents folder, and we're going to navigate to the thing that we just set up. So I'm going to go into my Can 115. So I have all my little activity folders already set up for the month. 1.3, 3D assets, and here are the two things that came with the zip file. Okay, so we're going to simply select the character file. We're going to hit open. It'll say, do you want to save it? There's nothing in here to save, so we're going to say, no, we don't want to save it, unless you want to save an empty scene. And we're in. So it opened up pretty quick. Now this project's it's pretty simple. There's not really a whole lot in here. If I click on it, you can see it lights up when I select it. We have this thing called Nefertiti Geo, and we have something called Stand Geo. And you can see over here in the outliner, and we'll talk about all these different pieces through the lecture. We have all these different little areas where if I select things, certain other parts of the interface change. Like over here, things are changing. If I click over here, it's highlighting stuff in this area. I know you guys were probably in here in the attribute editor from 1.1. If I click on this stuff, things in the attribute editor change. So depending on what you're selecting, different parts of the interface will change. So it's all based on your selection. Now, before we get too much into what the interface does and how we use this stuff, let's just try to figure out our basic viewport hotkeys. So the viewport is this whole big section right here. Anytime you guys hear me talk about the viewport, I'm talking about this stuff right in the middle. Now there can be multiple viewports in Maya, but by default, we're kind of seeing this singular just default viewport setup. Now, to move around in the viewport, I just want you guys to look down your keyboard for a second. So take your left hand. You probably have heard me talk about this in one of my videos. We're going to do something called the claw. What you want to do is have your pinky finger or your ring finger on control. I actually have my ring finger on shift, and then I have my pointer finger on alt. So basically, those three fingers are just kind of sitting on control, shift, and alt, and it kind of makes a weird shape. I call it the claw. It's going to be terrible for your hands many years later. But getting used to having your hand rest on those keys, so your wrist is kind of sitting next to the trackpad. But between Control, Shift, and Alt, you want to have your fingers just getting used to sitting in that position. And the reason for that is because those three keys, Control, Shift, and Alt, are tied to so many hotkeys inside of mine. I'll show you some examples. So let's say that we want to move around the camera. So camera movement in the viewport is all using the Alt key. So right now, if I click around without hitting any other key, I'm using middle mouse, I'm right clicking, I'm hitting left click, I'm basically doing every button click on my mouse, nothing is really happening. If I middle mouse wheel, I can see it's doing something, but I can't really do anything else. Now, if I hold Alt down, things change. So watch what happens now when I hold Alt, and I'm going to hold down my left mouse button. See how the icon's changing as soon as I'm holding down left mouse button? It's going from an arrow to like a little, kind of like a tumble looking icon. So we're going to click, and now if I left click and drag, I'm still holding Alt down, by the way, left click back and forth, we are moving the camera around. Okay, we're doing some rotation like an orbit. Now, because you guys probably have the same mouse I do, like this Alienware mouse, you know how the middle mouse button is basically like a wheel. So you can wheel in and out. Like I don't really use the track wheel very much, but you can wheel. But that wheel is also a button. And it's actually surprising how many people don't realize that until you actually push down on it. And you're like, oh, wait a minute, this does click. So if you hold Alt and push on the wheel, see how it's changing the icon? This, if I hold Alt and click on the middle mouse button and move my mouse around, is your translation. So between Alt left, Alt middle, and Alt right, which is back and forth, you can see we basically have the ability to move around in 3D. Now, when you guys first do this, especially if you haven't been using 3D software, it's going to feel really clunky. Yes, it will. You're going to be kind of clicking around and kind of struggling to move things a little bit where you're backed up into weird positions and you're trying to figure out how to reset the viewport and get back to the right area. It's just going to come with time. What you're trying to do is build almost like a muscle memory where you just get faster and it feels more natural. Eventually, what's going to happen is, in a couple of months from now, after you guys are doing this is going to feel so natural to you clicking and moving around inside of 3D that it's going to feel like this is just an extension of your body. It's like you're one of your arms. You're just going to be able to do this much, much quicker. You're not really going to think about it. You just end up doing it. So this is just the first stages of that and getting used to it. So again, Alt left, Alt middle, Alt right mouse button. 3 basic movements. Now, occasionally what's going to happen when you guys do move around inside of a 3D viewport, you will get to a point where the camera's in a weird spot and you don't know how to fix it. So I'm going to purposely kind of mess this up. Let's just say we middle mouse wheeled way back. Like it looks like things are gone. We're like, I don't know what to do. What happened? So what will happen occasionally is just by middle mouse wheeling or just you happen to move the camera the wrong way, it will look like you've just shot off into the void. I promise you, it's still working. The camera's just so far back that we can't see anything. So a good trick is if you look at the outliner over here. So here's my outliner. Now do you guys remember how to open the outliner? There's a couple ways to do it. So this, if you go up to Windows, you can see is right there. Here's our outliner, as well as a bunch of other things we're going to talk about, but there's our outliner. You can see this it'll open it if it was closed. And over here, which is probably the better way to do it, there's a button that's already lit up, says show or hide the outliner. This is typically the one I do. I just think it's faster to go over here and hit this to kind of collapse and open it, as opposed to me going in here and doing it this way. But again, you can do whatever you want. Now, because I have a couple things listed in the outliner, we're sort of seeing a list of all the things in the scene. Now, this is a pretty basic scene, right? There's not much in here. We have some things called persp, which is short for perspective, top, front, side. Notice they're dark gray, so they're hidden is what that means. We have this thing called Nefertiti Geo, Stand Geo, and then, you guys may have seen the stream just kind of buffer there for a second. We have Nefertiti Geo, Stand Geo, and a couple things called sets, selection sets. So if we know that the camera needs to pop back these guys, a really cool tip is going to be if you click on something in the scene that you know you should be seeing, like that Nefertiti geometry. If I just click on it in the outliner to select it, and then in the viewport hit F, so F as in focus. Oh, that stream might be coming back. Are you guys getting any buffering issues on your end? It could just be for me, but on my end it looks like the stream is cutting in and out. Let's give everybody a second here to make sure that's working again. Anyone else having any issues seeing the video? I'm going to refresh my page too, just to make sure. Yeah, it looks like I have some. Yeah, I have some bandwidth issues going on right now for some reason. So I can tell. Looks like it's having some issues buffering. Just make sure wireless is off. I'm going to turn off the Wi-Fi. It could be fighting with the Ethernet. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to refresh my page too. If it is completely frozen, what you want to do is just try refreshing the the page in Chrome or your browser and just see if that changes anything. But the good thing is this is all going to be recorded anyway, so even if it does kind of cut in and out, we should have quite a bit of this recorded for the rewatch. All right, so it looks like we're back. Yeah, stream health looks a little bit better now that I turned the Wi-Fi off. Okay, so what I was saying is, before it cut out, is I want to get back to that geometry. So I'm going to click on it, and if in the viewer, if I hit F for like focus or frame, hit F, see how it popped the camera back? And so it's a good way to sort of force the camera to zoom into whatever it is you're trying to select. So for example, if we're back here, click on the stand, F, the head, F. If I had like a random object in here, like we'll make a cube, and I'll just throw this over here. And I'll go over the translation tools in a second as well. We'll click on the cube, F, go back here, F. And remember, you can also click on stuff in here. So just by me clicking on things in the outliner and then hitting F in the viewport, that also is a quick way to jump around between things. For this one, it's not too bad because there's only a couple objects, but with much larger environments, it's a really cool way just to hop around the project instead of you trying to constantly move the camera and try to figure out where something is. All right, let's just delete that cube. Okay. Now the other thing too, since we're kind of getting into some different things with cameras, is I want you to look down here at the bottom of the viewport. You can see where it says perspective, and you know how we saw this up here, this thing called perspective over here, and look at the icon, it looks like a camera, right? So what you're kind of noticing here is that in our viewport, by default, we are currently looking through a camera. So we haven't created a camera, but it's already with the project, perspective camera. So the perspective camera is our default camera inside of Maya, and typically you really don't want to change it or do too much with it. Just leave it at default. But eventually we are going to want to make a new camera, right? Because the perspective camera is our working camera, and we don't want to have this be the one that we set up to match these guys. So you can almost think of it like pretend you are the photographer and you're setting up a camera to take a photo or for a shot. There's a difference between you physically walking around the set and then what the camera sees. So you want to think of perspective as you. This is you moving around, picking things up, moving pieces of the set into different locations, designing something, moving lights around, whatever you need to do. The camera that you're taking the picture with, or what's called a render, which is something we're going to do later, when you're sort of taking that photo or that picture, that is something completely different. So we want to have a separate camera to create this. We are going to be using perspective just so we can move around in 3D without affecting what this thing is doing. So they're two different things, a render camera and a perspective camera, our working camera. So if we want to make a new camera, what we're going to do is we're going to come up here to create, go down to cameras, and you can see right here we have a list of 3 different cameras we could create. We're going to do the first one. This is called a single point camera. Now down here a little error popped up. It's something to do with Arnold, which is a plugin for Maya. Occasionally, you are going to see random little errors pop up like this. Typically, they don't really mean anything, but if you're ever curious about what this is, if you do see some red that pops up, if you hit the little button on the right, it's going to launch the script editor. And if you scroll down, actually, you can see a history of all the things I've been doing, me clicking on all the different objects. But if you keep scrolling down, it'll sort of tell you specifically what it is. And once you guys get a little more comfortable with Maya, these are actually really handy because you can start copying some of this information from the error. And if I just put it in Google, we can actually do a search specifically for this problem. And there's a good chance that someone else out there has already had this happen to them. And you can start figuring out what this actually means. So I'm not really too worried about it. It's nothing serious, but you can search for this stuff if you want, if you're just trying to troubleshoot something. So let's just close out of that. Okay, so I've got a camera. Now you can see it's right here, but I'm not really seeing it. Like, where is the camera, right? How do we change cameras? So there's a bunch of ways to change cameras inside of Maya. Um, Over here on the left side, we have 3 different buttons. The current one that we're in is called this one. This is our single panel viewport. That's what we're already using, actually. Now below that, we have a quad and what I call a split. Now if I hit the quad button, watch what happens here in the viewer. Now notice when I do that, we get 4 different viewports. Because if you look at the top, these are all viewports. They're different. You can move around on all of them. I can move this around. I can back this up. Now I can't do tumble in this one. I can't do alt left. So I'm trying to do my rotation like I'm doing here. See how it's kind of like not doing anything? It's actually telling me it's locked. The orthographic view's locked. Okay, we'll talk about that in a second. And on front, same thing. We can back up, front. And what's this one? The top. So I'm sure probably most of you already kind of understand what this is trying to tell us, right? We are seeing different orthographic cameras. So our side, top, front, and we have our regular perspective camera over here. It's just different ways to view a project. It's really handy because sometimes when you're trying to place something, like if I'm in perspective and let me actually fix the pivot on this real quick so the manipulator's a little closer. Let's say I'm trying to place it and I'm having a really hard time seeing if it's going through the stand. Like I've done something like this and I'm having a hard time getting that placement right. If you zoom in on the side right here, I can get really close with this little side camera. And if I hit 4, so probably remember from the video, there's like wireframe shaded, wireframe unshaded. If I hit 4, you see how I can see through it? And I can see this little chunk that's going through the stand. And now if I use the translate tool, let's actually talk about that real quick. So translate, you guys actually remember your different shortcuts for translate, rotate, scale. I'm going to put you all on the spot. What are my hotkeys for translate, rotate, and scale? Because we do have buttons. We could do the buttons, but that means we're moving our mouse all the way over here. That's so much work, right? So what are those hotkeys? You got it. Yep. So yeah, so a bunch you've already kind of nailed it, right? WER. So if I don't have anything selected, like let's go over here to the basic selection tool. We're just going to click this. So default is just your selection tool. This is Q, W, E, there we go. All right, just want to check again to see if you guys can hear me one more time. You guys still hear my audio again? All right, cool. Yeah, my whole computer just had like a seizure there. Everything locked up, and all the next thing I know is the audio cut out. All right, cool. So what I was showing you guys is that if you do W, if I move it up and down, see how I can actually see the contact point there, and I can get a really good idea. I can get really close actually with the side camera and try to get that lined up just like that. Okay, so now it's at a good position, and then we can simply back up, back this guy up, and it looks like it's making a really good contact exactly where it should be. That's the quad view. So 4 different cameras. Now the cool thing about this too is there actually are quicker ways to get into that. So check this out. If I hit space in the viewport, watch what happens. And so space pops up the quad view automatically. And the interesting thing here is that depending on where my mouse is at over the viewports, look what happens if I do space again. Space, space bar, space, space. I'm just hitting space over and over again, but see how when I move it over different viewers, it's like allowing me to full screen whatever one I want to look into. So I can really hop around here pretty quickly if I wanted to full screen really any of those guys, which is really fantastic. So those cameras, by the way, we were looking at, those are the 4 guys right here. So those same 4 things you were seeing at the top of the outliner, that was it. Those are the 4 cameras. Now, this still doesn't really solve our issue, though, where we have this guy, camera 1. Where is camera 1? Because every time I hit space, I'm not really seeing camera 1 pop up. So this is a new camera that we made. This is not one of the default cameras inside of Maya. So let's go back here again. So I'm in my regular single viewport. This can be changed by, so if you're in this camera, go to Panels at the top of the viewport. Okay, and you can see we have perspective. We have orthographic. These are the actual, the other orthographic cameras we saw over here. But under perspective, look what shows up, camera 1. And if I click it, watch the bottom, and then watch what happens in the viewport. Now I know this looks bad. You're thinking, oh boy, it's black. That can't be a good sign. It's actually totally fine. We're looking through the camera. Now I want to show you the reason why this looks weird. So let me just go back to perspective real quick. Because you have to remember, when you make a camera, this is a physical thing in the scene. It is placed in here. We're just not really understanding where it's currently positioned. Now, what's a good way to find out where it's positioned? Remember how I was showing you guys, if you click on something and you hit F, it'll zoom into it. So if I click on the camera and hit F, watch where we're going to pop into. You can see it. So let me back up the camera. We're going to Alt right mouse button. Let's keep zooming back. And that's showing you why that camera looked so weird when we were looking through it. It's when we created it, it's defaulting in the stand, at the bottom of the stand. And so looking through it, we're just seeing the inside of this cube right now. That's why it looks so terrible. So we just have to move it outside of this object, and it's going to look totally fine. Now, there's a reason why it's appearing here. I know this probably seems kind of odd, like that's not a very good location. The reason it was created here is because that location, I don't know if you can see it. Let me hide this, the stand just for a second. So if you want to hide and unhide something, by the way, if you click on it in the outliner or here, hit H. See how it turns dark gray, kind of like these guys? That's just hiding that object. But I just want you guys to see why the camera was created here. What's this? This is our grid. This is actually showing you this is the center of the 3D world. It just happens to be, just sort of by chance, that the center of the 3D world, our coordinate 0, 0, 0, was at the base of the stand. That's it. It's just the way it happens to be set up. Now I'm going to unhide it again. So we're going to click on the stand and bring it back. So instead, what we're going to do is use a split view to control the camera that we're placing and use a perspective at the same time. So this third one right here is split, and you're going to be very, very comfortable with this because you're going to see me use split view all the time. Like it's a guarantee in almost every video you watch, I'm going to have this guy loaded up. So here's split. We got it loaded, and you can see what it's done is it's done 2 different viewports, the front and perspective. Now the reason we're doing this though is for this reason. We're going to move perspective here, all right, just anywhere so I can see the camera, kind of the whole scene. We're going to change this viewport to be the camera that we just created. Now I could move the camera out and you can watch it update. So if I simply click on that camera or just click on it in the outliner, remember how we have our translate, rotate, scale tools? Translate, let's move it back and watch what happens on the left viewport. Look at that. See, we're pulling it back. Keep going. And you can see there it is. I can move it up. I'm just using one axis handle at a time. So we're going to move it up, right? I can move it to the side. We're basically moving the camera in the perspective view. You can see the little icon, and you're watching it update right over here. So it's a really cool way, like when you're kind of getting used to the software, just to sort of visualize and understand where it's positioned so you can see it, and you're seeing what it looks like to look through the camera all at the same time. So hopefully this sort of makes sense, but that's really the benefit of using the split view is you can sort of use two different perspective views. One is our default camera, one is our created camera to get a really nice and quick, easy layout. Now I'm going to reset the camera back to 0 again. So we're going to go, I'm going to click on the camera, and in the channel box, if you guys probably remember from the videos, the channel box is showing our position in 3D, right? So we're going to go to the camera that we made here, and I'm going to just drag through translate XYZ. We're going to hit 0 and then hit enter. So I'm popping it back to the origin where it started. What's another way I could move the camera? I don't have to always grab it and do this. Remember, you can back up the camera here just like you do over here. This is the same controls. So if I do Alt right mouse button, and it might take a bit, but I am now moving it back. You can see it update over here. As I keep moving it back, it changes. Alt middle, right? I'm just moving it through the camera as opposed to over here and moving it with the handle, but it's really the same thing. I don't think that moving it this way is probably the most efficient way to do it, because moving in 3D like this is still going to be much, much faster for you guys. But there are a lot of cases where you really do want that precise control of being able to slide it across the scene with your manipulator. And obviously you can type in very specific numbers up here as well if you're someone who wants to get exact location. Maybe like an art director says, hey, I want this camera positioned at exactly 90 units in Y. You can just click in Y and hit 90 and hit enter. It'll move it to 90 units vertically. So these are all different ways to move it. Okay, now I want to rename the camera. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a couple things here based on activity 1.3. So let's say that we're trying to construct our shot. So we're going to hop in here, back into 1.3. I'm going to open up the documentation, and let's just try to do one of these cameras together for 1.3. So there's 4 total you're doing. There's 2 for the character, 2 for the environment. We're going to do 1. So we're currently in the file. Actually, I have to rename that to .mb, but yeah, so character angled. We made a new camera. We haven't renamed it. We don't have the resolution gate on. We haven't done any of this stuff, but we're trying to match this, okay? So let's kind of jump out of here. Let's do the renaming, and let's turn on the resolution gate and get the resolution set up. So the first thing we want to do is rename the camera, because currently when you make it, every time you make something in Maya, whether it's an object, like under the polygon modeling menu, we have like little cylinders and primitive shapes. P cylinder 1, this is P cone 1. Everything comes with its own default name. That doesn't mean that we want to leave it that way. So camera 1 is not very helpful. Let's name it just like it says in the documentation. Okay, so it says to name this character angled cam. So to name something in Maya, you can either name it by double clicking here or going here in the channel box and naming it this way, or a third way, if you're in the attribute editor, you can also name it right here in this tab. It's all the same thing. So I usually do it through camera 1. So what I'm going to do is double click on camera 1 to bring up the rename, and we're going to call this character angled cam. Right, we have this little error again. I'm not going to worry about it, but we've renamed the camera. It's updated down here. Now we want to next get the resolution gate turned on and then try to position it in the right spot. So what's the resolution gate? Well, since imagine we're basically taking a photo, and some of you guys have probably used Photoshop before. You know how when you guys, anytime you're going to create an image, you have to define the resolution you're going to work with. Like, is it a portrait where it's a taller image than it is wide? Is it a really wide landscape where it's like a very wide aspect ratio? Is it a perfect square where the width and height are the same? These are things we really need to define inside of Maya. Now, currently, this camera doesn't really know what it's supposed to be capturing, because if I move this little middle bar in the viewport, see how it looks like it's getting wider, like I'm seeing more information? That's not really the way the camera works. It's not actually seeing more. We just don't know what the camera is looking at. And that's where the resolution gate comes in. So at the top of the viewport, we have a lot of different buttons. One of the key ones here is this guy right here called resolution gate. Now I want you guys to kind of make a little mental note of this. The two buttons right here are really similar. There's a film gate and resolution gate. Make sure you're using resolution gate and not the one next to it. But when you turn it on, see how it kind of makes this little gray sort of bounding box, or a gray shaded box around it. This is the resolution gate, and it's showing you what the camera is going to see. So when you turn it on, everything in the box, like if you were to eventually create an image, this is the only part that would be captured. All this other stuff outside of the white box that's in that gray area, you would not see it. But even though it's not correct at the moment, this helps us understand that something isn't quite right, and at least we can get the camera adjusted to get it in the right spot. Now, something else that's kind of interesting that's happened is that when I do this, if you look at the top, it's probably really hard to see in the stream, but it says a couple different numbers here. It says 960 by 540. This is the resolution of the camera. So it's 960 pixels across, 540 pixels vertically. So this is kind of like you going into Photoshop, making a new canvas or a new project, and you're saying, I want it to be 960 by 540. You would end up with a canvas that looks just like this. That's all we're seeing. But if we look at the documentation again, we've got the resolution gate on. This is the thing we haven't done. Set the resolution to 720 by 1080. Okay, so that's going to fix it. And this is a 2:3 aspect ratio. So that just means if you break this fraction down into a simpler fraction, this will simplify to 2/3. So let's just fix the resolution. Now, to fix the resolution, we need to go in the render settings. And this is all in the videos, by the way, in 1.32. I just kind of wanted to do this with you guys while we're all here so we can kind of talk about it. So the resolution and the render settings, we want to get to that by going to the top of Maya, and there's a button right here called Display Render Settings. So we're going to click and open this up. So it's right there, kind of next to the little blue ball. So we're going to this thing right here that looks like a little gear icon on it. Now, when you go into here, yours might look something like this. A couple of you may see it set to Arnold. It doesn't really matter right now, but I'm going to put it back to software. And just stick in the first tab and just scroll way down to the bottom. There's a bunch of other things in here we're going to do later in the month, but scroll past all this. We're just looking for the section at the bottom that's called image size. It's currently doing a preset. This is the default preset Maya, HD 540, which means 960 by 540. That's what we're seeing right there. So what was it we need to use? 720 by 1080. We're going to go to width. We're going to type in 720. Go to height, 1080, enter. And you can notice as soon as I did that, everything changed, right? This is now controlling what this resolution gate looks like. So now we have that portrait look that we were trying to get the whole time. Now, one thing I want you guys to be careful about, this has happened a lot more frequently in the class. All these adjustments you do right here, they will change some of the settings down here. And depending on if this is turned on or off, or if this is set to device aspect ratio instead of pixel aspect ratio, it's kind of weird because all these attributes are linked and they control each other. Be very, very careful in the process of you changing these that you don't accidentally have the pixel aspect ratio change. This needs to be set to 1. So if you do change it, if you notice that this is adjusted for some reason, just by you hitting different buttons and going through presets, I want to make sure that you guys put this back to 1. It's not an issue right now, but in week 3, if this is messed up, you will notice a bunch of problems when you're creating your images. They're going to look squashed and stretched, and it's not going to be good. So all we're doing is changing that right there. It looks great. We're going to close out. We're already done. Now we can try to match the image. So let's do that. Now for me to see this, it's a little tricky. I do have a second monitor off to the side. You guys can't see that, and I could have put it up here in my second monitor and do it that way. But for the sake of the capture, I'm going to assume you guys don't have a second monitor. Let's try to do this a different way. At the top of Maya, I'm going to double click the white bar or hit this one right here to basically sort of break it away from full screen. And yours might not do that. It might be a little bit smaller. It might, come down here, but I'm just going to sort of adjust Maya, grab the end, and just pull this in a little bit, just so I can take this image and throw it on the side. Now, unfortunately, I can't really scale this down too much before it doesn't really get any narrower. So I'm going to take Maya and just bring this in a little more here. So I'm trying to make space so I can see the two side by side. And I don't really need the split view at this point because I can kind of just look through my camera to get it lined up. So remember how we do the full screen? How if you put your mouse over one of the viewports, it'll make that the full screen. So I'm hitting spacebar, right? And you can also hit this button right here if you want. I can click on this, and even if you're in perspective, you can still change your camera in a single viewport to the correct camera. So either way, eventually you will get to the right camera. When you're looking through it, let's try to line it up. Now, what I'm going to do is try to do it by hitting F. So let's just pretend our camera's in a terrible spot, like we're way off the map, like we need to get this adjusted. We want to click on the head. We're going to hit F. That's going to sort of snap the camera back in. And now what we're going to do is hit Alt, left click. Let me actually click off the head too, so it's not all illuminated. We're going to click off the head, Alt left. I'm going to click. So I'm just tumbling, and I'm moving really slow. I'm not doing anything too drastic. We're just going to move around. And all I'm not trying to do is analyze sort of the position of everything. So if I'm too far back, you can see we have big gaps. Too much of the pedestal's visible. The gap on the top of the head's too much. So we're going to use Alt right to push in. And I'm going to use Alt left. And I can see with this one, it's seeing a little bit too much on the top of the pedestal. This is a little more of a glancing angle. So I'm going to do Alt left and go up to tumble that down. Alt left, and I'm trying to spin it. I'm looking at the nose. You're going to see all these little clues in here that'll kind of help you out. See how the nose just barely has that opposite cheek that pushes beyond it? We're pretty close to that, right? So I'm just kind of doing Alt left and just nudging my mouse around a little bit until it's kind of like this. And I think the only thing I'm a little off with right now is like the spacing on the edge. So I might need to do Alt right just to push in just a little more, Alt middle to go down, Alt right to back up. I'm just kind of doing very, very small adjustments until it looks correct. Maybe Alt left to kind of go back up just a little bit. But eventually you're going to end up with something that looks really close to this just with a little practice. Once you get to the point where you think this looks really close, we want to lock the camera because when you're a new user inside of Maya, it's really easy to forget that this camera can be moved. And so what'll happen is once you guys get it in the right spot, you might accidentally do something like this where you think you're in perspective, and before you know it, you realize like, oh crap, I just moved my camera. I had it lined up exactly where I wanted it, and now it's ruined. So I'm going to back up. Now, if you want to undo the camera position, if you look at your keyboard next to the P key, we have those little brackets. If I do the left bracket, that is an undo for camera movements. It's very, very handy. So we'll say about there is pretty good. But regardless, I want to lock the camera. So left and right bracket, by the way, those are your undo and redo camera movements. But if I want to lock this down, at the top of your camera in the viewport is an icon right there that looks like a camera with a padlock on it. Hit it, and I want you to see what this has done. So I'm going to go back to the channel box over here. We're going to click on the camera, and let me hit this button again because I want you to see what this is doing in here when I do this. Off, on. See how there's that little gray color that's popping up when I have the camera selected? its translate and rotate values are getting this little gray color that's going on top of it. That is it locking the translation and rotation. When you lock it, this means I'm trying to move the camera and it won't do it. I cannot physically move this at all because it is locked. As soon as I unlock it, I can move it again. But we're going to lock it down. The camera is in a perfect spot. I don't have to worry about ever, messing this up again in the future. So that is super, super important. I would highly recommend all you guys use the lock feature just to save you the headache of accidentally, breaking your cameras later on, because it is very, very easy to do that, since you guys are still pretty new to Maya. And really what you would do is just repeat that again for another camera. So you're still going to creating a camera, and then you're going to make look through the new camera, and you'll name it, of course, and then you're going to line it up for the front shot. Oh yeah. So Luke, you actually brought up a good point. So um, there are focal length adjustments with the camera, and let me actually do this with a new one. I'll show you what he's talking about. So I'm going to create a new camera, and we know where it is, right? Let's go to perspective. Oh, come on. There we go. Perspective. It's under here again, right? Because it's the same thing like we saw last time. Let's just move this out. We'll look through. I can also, by the way, if you want to look through the camera, if you don't like doing it this way, if you click on the camera, you can do look through selected. That's also a shortcut to look through it. So what he's talking about is focal length. If you have the camera selected in the attribute editor here, there's a focal length adjustment attribute. It's also down here in the channel box, a little below the translation is a focal length right there. But if I change it, I want you to see what this does. So you can type stuff in. You could over here, you can also just slide it if you wanted to. But let's just type in focal length of, we'll do a 70. Okay, here's 15. 120. I'm just kind of going between different extreme values here. So this is basically a zoom. You're changing the field of view for the camera, where you're widening what it sees or narrowing what it sees. And it's really, I think what most people just know this as is a zoom feature. Now visually what this does is if you have a really high focal length, let me try to put the camera in the same spot. See how it's kind of acting weird? I'm going to click on the head and hit F just to kind of get it zoomed in again. Look at the difference between this and what we had done before. Like, see how it looks a little flatter? Like the curvature of like the headdress isn't really the same. Like everything just seems a little, like, well, I guess flat. That's because we're zooming in and we're sort of killing all those really interesting perspective lines. So it's actually a trick that a lot of people use when they're doing photography. If you have someone that has a very if they're, let's say they have like a bigger nose, they will actually use a higher focal length to flatten out their face, and it will kind of cause the nose to look like it doesn't stick out quite as much. So we're just flattening all of our lines by doing that. Now, if I go here and have a lower focal length, let's do something like a 20. This is the other extreme, where now if I kind of come in really close, you can see the perspective lines are exaggerated. This one's really cool. I kind of like using lower focal length sometimes if I want to like exaggerate sort of this towering effect from something. I had to do this a couple times for a few shots where I wanted it to feel like we were miniature and like simple objects were way bigger than they normally were. You can put a lower focal length, and you can see just by being at the right angle under the head, it looks like this is a giant compared to us. So it's just a simple camera trick. But yeah, so to kind of get back to what you're saying, Luke, yep, we did not have to do any focal length adjustments for this. I do talk about it in the video, so you're going to learn about it, but I'm not expecting you guys to do that for this activity. It's just a little bit too much right now since you're all new to Maya. I just want you to get the basics down first, but you are more than welcome to do focal length adjustments on your own. And actually, before we're out of here, I'm going to show you guys something kind of cool. We're going to do a push-pull with the camera and show you some keyframing as kind of a final touch. But all we would really do for this is the same thing. We're going to go back to 35, which is default. Make sure your resolution gate's on, and you can see because we already did the render settings, this is already set up. It's really just a matter of me lining the camera up until it looks like this guy. Oh, I think, there we go. The stream may have just popped out, but I think it's back again. we're just lining it up until it looks like this. We'd lock the camera, want to rename it, and essentially, when you guys get that finished, you can save your Maya file. So we made another camera. We're going to do it for the front. Once we're done, and we're not going to do the whole thing, you'd save it as character cam. If you want to save the file, go to File, Save As. I would again put it in one of your folders that you've created, and just down here rename it to character_cam. And that's going to be one of the files for your turn-in. The other one you're doing for the environment, this one you don't have to match any reference. You're still making two cameras. I'm letting you guys pick the resolution you want to use. If you want to do a widescreen, portrait like the character, that's fine too. As long as you're looking at the balcony and this thing right out here, that's all I'm looking for. So I'm going to let you guys design and figure out what angle you want to use for the two cameras for the environment. So it's just a fun one for you guys to play around with different composition ideas and see what you can kind of come up with. But everything you do with these cameras, we're going to use them later on for lighting. We're going to use them when we create our images. Everything builds on itself through the month. So this is just the first time you guys are using the project. And since we've got a few minutes left, this is a little more advanced, but I thought it'd be kind of fun to do this. We're going to do animation. We're going to do a push-pull. So we're going to make this camera move over time. So we're going to rename this camera to something different. We'll call this character push-pull. Actually, push-pull cam. Okay, so push-pull is basically the effect where we're going to kind of combine using the focal length zoom effect with where the camera is positioned. So what we want to do is zoom in, but we're also going to, as we're zooming in, physically move the camera back. Okay, so let's kind of go here to where we're going to start. And we're going to set some keyframes. So this is not required. I just want you guys to kind of see it because it's fun. And we have a couple minutes here. So we're going to set a keyframe. So keyframing is how you move things around. You can see at the bottom of Maya, we have a little time slider. So to set a keyframe on this camera up here, we want to mark the camera's position on frame 1. As you can see, this is a frame sequence right here. On frame 1, keep this position. So I'm going to do a couple hotkeys. We're going to do Shift. Remember how WER is translate, rotate, scale? Translate, rotate, scale. If you just simply add Shift to those hotkeys, watch what happens. Here's Shift W. See how it turned red? Shift E. So by doing Shift W and Shift E with that camera selected, it's put a keyframe. So on frame 1, it thinks it's in this position. Now I'm going to come down to focal length. And we're going to, now this does not have a hotkey to keyframe it like the other ones do. So we're going to right click on focal length and just do, where is it? Key selected. So that's going to set a key on focal length. And you can right click on any of these and do key selected. Now we're going to click. We're going to then back up the camera. Let's actually go to, let's do frame 120. We're going to back it up a lot, way back here. Okay, so in the last frame of our timeline, we're going to do, again, same thing, Shift W. We have the camera selected, Shift W, Shift E. So I've now keyed it on two extremes of the timeline. See if I just kind of click through this and click and drag, see how it's just backing up the camera? We're doing an animation actually. It's kind of cool. But what I'm going to do is also keyframe the focal length. So we're going to click, and I'm going to do a little shortcut here where I'm going to hold down middle mouse button and drag in the viewer. See how I'm sliding through the attribute? We're going to middle mouse drag, I'm zooming in right here like this. When I'm in a good spot, right click, key. Okay, that little warning down there, that error is a little bit annoying. We're going to hit the backup button on our little play control here on the right. Back up, hit play, and see what's happening. It's basically doing this weird effect where it is, at the same time it is zooming in, it is also pulling the camera back. This is a little bit of a hard one to see because there's not much behind the character, and so it just looks like the character is flattening. But if I go to like a split view, you can see what this camera is doing. Let me show you what it's doing. There it is. It's like flying backwards and zooming in as it's flying backwards. And we're kind of getting this effect where it's basically flattening things out. I have a better example in my video where I do this in the dive deeper area, where I do it on the environment. It's a little bit easier to see the effect. It's used quite a lot though in videos. One of the most common scenes, or one of the most popular ones, is from Jaws. So you'll probably see that. But anyway, that'll probably do it for our live session. We already hit our hour mark. Um, do you guys have any questions so far from anything from like the first activity 1.1? I haven't graded any of them yet. I'm going to do that tomorrow. But as far as anything we talked about today, anything that you're expected to do for 1.3, you guys have any questions about any of that? Okay. Looks like everyone's good. Cool. All right, guys, we did it. Week 1 live session is a wrap. If you guys need to get a hold of me for anything, obviously you can message me on the LMS. I'm also on Discord quite a bit. So most of you are probably on Discord. If you haven't joined Discord, I would highly, highly recommend doing that. I got a link in the live session activity at the top to get to the Discord channel. You can always hit me up on there. I'm on there quite a bit during the day. But it was good talking to you guys. Really cool to have a great turnout today. Super excited to see what you guys work on this week. And this is, again, still the beginning. Once you get to week 3, that's when this class is really going to come alive for you guys. Because actually, I'm going to show you this real quick just to get you excited. When you get farther in the class, you will be making things that look like this. The same cameras we're setting up, you guys will be making your own images inside of Maya. You're going to be setting up lights. You're using the compositions you built. We're going to be bringing them a nuke. This is everything. This is just the foundation for it, but this will be something you're doing later. So I think you'll really enjoy that when you get there. So that's going to be in week 4. And week 3, we're doing a couple things with the environment. Same thing, we're just setting up lights, and you guys get to play around with different lighting ideas and compositions for your environment project. So it should be a cool class for you guys. But that's all. I will catch up with you guys tomorrow or over the weekend. And if I don't talk to you, I'm sure I'll talk again for the live session in week 2. Hope everybody has a good night.